This is a Belisarius Prime Commander review. Belisarius Prime is the newest Prime version and the newest Cavalry Field Commander to come to the game. Is he going to be meta-shattering? In today's video, we're going to be covering his skills, talents, general build options you're going to want to use with him, pairings, and where he's going to fit in this very, very competitive Cavalry Field meta. Without further ado, let's get started. First, let's talk skills. Belisarius' primary skill is a 2400 damage factor, single target, and then the next 2 seconds the target loses 50 rage per second, so it chunks off 100 rage from the enemy, and if the target is surrounded, is inflicted with the ability that makes the active skill 200 more rage to use. So this will counter non-skill tree commanders very well. And I don't think it'll have as massive of an impact on skill tree commanders because they put out so much rage that a lot of times they have a rage overflow. But it does have an interesting effect that's very unique, and it disrupts the enemy. It may see use in garrison swarms because it drains their rage, as well as making the active skill more expensive to cast, which can be a very dangerous pair. It may have some unforeseen circumstances in the field when you consider things like Henry, where a percentage of his rage he might have that reduced damage, but overall, even then, your damage output is more important. So them losing the ability, even if they get less damage taken during that 80% to 100% range, like with Henry, even if they have effects like that and in future commanders as well, this is still going to be an insanely beneficial support skill. Unfortunately, it does only target a single target, which leaves an interesting gap. But the super high damage factor is extremely useful, and then a 5-second deception effect means that you're going to have a pretty solid uptime. If you pair him with a commander that has good rage generation, you can almost keep this enemy perpetually at 1200 rage needed for a skill instead of 1000, which even against a skill-based commander may be extremely hard for them to deal with. The second skill is a 30% attack, 20% march speed, and then when you exit combat you gain an additional 60% march speed. This is essentially one of the mobility talents in its own, so that is extremely solid and it's great for mobility. It's where a lot of people are thinking he's going to be a farm hunter, but we'll get into that a little later in the video. The third skill is a 25% defense, which is solid, and then while the commander's troops are on the map, if it launches a basic attack, it has a 10% chance to deal a 500 damage factor. This is a pretty plain ability, and it's not bad, but it's not really earth-shattering either. You'd see epic commanders with this level of stat. You do get more defense, but the damage factor is just kind of mediocre. The fourth skill is a 10% less skill damage taken, which is useful, but considering that infantry is the main source of normal damage, and you're already countered by infantry, this just makes you even weaker to infantry. And then if the commander's troop is attacking another troop that has less than 80% of their units, which in a field fight, most of them will, the commander's troops deal 30% more damage. This is very similar to his epic version, where you deal more damage to weaker enemies. And this is going to be a very, very popular ability in the whole Siege of Orleans or any kind of augmented skill base where you can pick up support skills. This will be huge. This is also very, very respectable for his 2400 damage factor, because then your 2400 damage factor is essentially treated as if it is about a 3000 damage factor, which is kind of crazy to think about. But overall, it's solid, it's something that has to be respected, and it's something that makes him extremely great at hunting weak enemies. Last, but certainly not least, his expertise says if the current target of the troop is surrounded, they receive increased damage based on the number of troops surrounding it. So this is not exclusive to you. This is what's important to remember. So if you are hitting an enemy with 3 troops, you're hitting with 1, your allies are hitting with 2 more, every single troop is dealing 6% more damage, not just you. So this is, if you're running a 5-man field crew with all your marches, you essentially get a 12% damage boost on whoever you attack for all your commanders. That means your Nevsky, if it's on a different pair, is dealing 12% more damage. Your Scipio Prime, 12%. Your Liang is doing 12% more damage to that target. It does only hit the one target since it's only a single target ability, but it is insanely useful for swarming down enemies. And really, the big thing that sticks out to me is that he's going to have a distinctive niche in the ability to track down weakened enemies. Farm hunting? Sure. But also, if you're ambushing enemies behind enemy lines when they're retreating from a fight, you're going to be able to defeat them very quickly and then get out of the field. Even if you're just running one march and you're not using this ability, he's going to have good damage output and something that you're going to have to respect. But it's not necessarily something that's going to be for everyone. Next, let's go on to talents. Belisarius has the Cavalry, Versatility, Mobility trees, and those are decent, but the Versatility tree is fairly bad. So we're going to ignore that and just know that you probably want to invest 0 talent points into this. So this is overall what I suggest you try if you're going to use Belisarius in the field for significant fighting. So here's some key points you want to go with. If you want to go to the rallying cry, you don't have to go all the way up here, but I like it because 15% more damage for the first 10 seconds of a battle. If you're using him for hit and run tactics, you basically get 15% more damage for the duration, because if you're hitting somebody for more than 10 seconds and you haven't defeated them, you're probably either not able to catch up with them, you're going to defeat them anyway, and the 15% more damage isn't a big deal, or things have gone south and you need to be getting out of the fight. So you're going to get that 15% more damage for the important portion of the fight, at which point you've either defeated the enemy, you're going to defeat them anyway, or you need to get out of there. Some other things to consider, you can use the health here with your extra point. It's an option. It's 1% health is still something. And Blast and Shield is a must-have, which you already have if you go to the Keystone. But even if you don't go to the Keystone, and Blast and Shield is a big deal, and you should be going for it. Equestrian Excellence is good because you get a 10% chance for 15% march speed whenever you launch a basic attack. This helps you stick to enemies who are trying to retreat, even if they're a lower tier unit than you. Disarm is not necessary, but it is something that is decent if you're looking for it and you're looking to be a more active combatant and use it as a debuff march instead of a hunting march. Undying Fury is super good, 9 extra rage. The more rage you get, the more skills you cast. The more skills you cast, the fewer enemy skills get cast because of the debuff Belisarius gives. But really, the red tree is where you get most of the value, so you want most of your points going into that. Alternatively, for the mobility, this is what I like to go with. If you decide to go with the health here, you can go with a health point here as well, and then take away the 2 points in Vortex. But I like to be able to slow down the enemy, so if they do start to run, I can just kind of keep them slowed down. And if you slow them down once, it might be enough to completely finish off an enemy. The biggest thing is you want swiftness, so that whenever you do take skill damage, you get march speed to get away from the enemy. Whether you are fighting in the field as a support march or as a ambush march, that's something you absolutely need. Hasty Departure, again, even if you're not doing an ambush march, this is super necessary because you can use it to reposition very quickly and flank the enemy. And oftentimes that could even distract the enemy and get them pulled away from the front quite easily. And even if they don't get pulled away from the front, you get repositioned and get regrouped with your allies a lot easier, which keeps you safe, keeps you in the fight longer, and keeps you able to support allies for longer. Lightning Charge is 6% move speed, you can't ever complain about that. 1.5% more counterattack damage on spiked armor is good. Saving Cross is super solid and really underappreciated, because 9% less skill damage of all types is honestly super important, especially if things start to go south. That might be the difference between you limping away with some troops or you being completely wiped out. But overall, focus on the red tree, get the value you can get on the blue tree, and really avoid the versatility tree on Belisarius because it's just not very useful. Now, let's go on to formations. Really, your formation is going to be based on your playstyle. If you're using him as a combat support, probably Wedge is your best option because the skill damage is going to help you deal more damage and help you be more of an asset to your team. Unfortunately, Echelon isn't really usable because it's damage taken on the enemy, therefore it's a debuff instead of a percentage-based buff to another troop. So it doesn't really do as well, and it's something you should avoid because it just does not benefit you. Triple line is a very solid option as well, because the march speed is nice, and then you're able to reposition more quickly. Whether you are a support fighter or a ambush type fighter, both of those playstyles can benefit from using triple line, and the specialty inscriptions are very, very solid for repositioning quickly and putting a lot of quick damage out and then disconnecting. And doing so allows you to use that top red talent for cavalry a lot more effectively because you leave the fight and then re-enter it. So that's something else to consider as well. But overall, the main one you're probably going to use is Wedge, with some use rate of triple line as well. But you may also just see people using whatever is best, because him as a support, the biggest thing is if you've got armaments that keep him alive for longer, that is the best thing you can do for your allies, because that 12% damage to your allies may be more significant than the damage you're putting out with the wedge formation on yourself. So that's something else you should consider, and focus on survivability with as much health and damage reduction as you can get. And if you can stack some additional move speed, that would be super useful for you as well. Next, let's go on to pairings. Typically, your pairing is going to fit your playstyle. If you are looking for an ambush-heavy playstyle commander to go with Belisarius Prime, I cannot stress enough how good Joan Prime is. She's got the support tree, which gives you the access to your emergency protection for damage reduction, loose formation, hasty departure, just like the mobility tree. So you can run Joan Prime primary, whether you're farm hunting or ambush fighting, and you essentially get a 2,000 damage factor skill, a 2,400 damage factor skill, then another 2,000 damage factor. So you throw down 6,400 damage factor on a single target in the matter of about a second and a half. Tack on the fact that she buffs damage, she has good mobility, and when you're off Alliance territory, like in Ruins and Altars, you deal 5% more durable damage, which helps a little bit. And just generally solid damage output boosting skills that synchronize well together. And even if you're not farm hunting, even if you're just trying to pick off enemies in the back lines and wreak havoc, this is the pair for you. It is legitimately kind of terrifying because the amount of damage that she can output as it is on its own, and I thought she was very underrated as a farm hunter on her release. And if you can put a commander who's specifically designed to do a lot of damage very quickly with her, it's dangerous. It might not be the most survivable pair, and that's something you're going to have to worry about and wrestle with a little bit, but it's something that you should really consider using, especially because Joan Prime doesn't necessarily have to be maxed out to be useful. Alternatively, if you're looking for something a little more traditional, Nevsky will be a good option, as he is with most commanders. He's got good damage boosts, good survivability, good mobility, and generally he's Nevsky. There's not much else you can say. Alternatively, you could use something like William, because the debuffs that William gives is also fairly supportive and fairly based on helping your allies do more damage more than yourself. So that would be a very good support pair if you're doing the field. But at the same time, you're going to get a lot of focus that way. But this way, if you do 50 rage per second for 3 seconds, while your enemy's losing 50 rage per second for 2 seconds, you're going to wreak a lot of havoc. However, the two of them together have very poor talent tree selection, so that'll be the thing you have to be cautious of. Quo would also work, but it's very much in a similar way to Nevsky, so if you want to interchange them, you certainly can. You'll do a lot more single target damage, little less support, good survivability, but it's just going to come down to preference, as Belisarius will pair well with pretty much every commander that's in the field meta right now for Cavs. It's just going to come down to how you want to arrange each one to synchronize. If you want to go double support, that's terrific. If you want to balance them out and have 2 different half support, half damage marches, that's fine too. So where is Belisarius going to fit in the meta? He's going to be in an interesting spot, I think, because the biggest thing to remember is his expertise, the most important skill he has with the damage taken bonus, is an expertise, meaning you have to invest 690 heads to get that. But you also have a good debuff on his primary skill. You do have a good skill on his 4th skill that does more skill damage to weakened targets. So if you ran on 5-1-1-5, you'd still provide support, but at the same time, you're not providing the maximum support. I don't think he's going to be a must-have for infantry and archer players like Nevsky is. And it's probably a good thing that he's not that game-breaking. But he's also going to be like, whoa, where he does have a distinct niche and a distinct set of players who are going to be able to use him very effectively. And if you were a Cav player, or you're looking to build a 3rd Cav March or a 2nd Cav March, and you already have Nevsky, he pairs so well with everybody, you can really pick who you want to pair him with and make a pairing out of it. If you want to be more support, go William. If you want to be a farm hunter, go Joan. If you want to be raw 1v1 damage, well, we're Nevsky. The options are really as far as you want to go with them. And because of that, you're going to have a wide range of people. Some people will not need him at all. And some people will be wanting to build him right away because he does fulfill that extra march or that extra niche that's needed to be filled for them. So ultimately, I think he's going to be somewhere in the middle where he's not the most game-breaking have-to-have-it commander, but he's also not going to be completely irrelevant. I think you'll be seeing a lot more of him in the field than you may be expecting at the start. But with that, we'll wrap up our discussion on Belisarius Prime. I definitely think he's an interesting commander, and I think he's going to have a very distinct niche in the game. It's just going to be where he settles out relative to the very, very packed cavalry meta. But let me know what you think. Are you planning on building him? Do you think he's going to really significantly change the meta? Or is he going to be more of the same? Let me know in the comments. If you want to hear me cover a different subject as well, let me know in the comments, or join the Discord using the link in the description, because those suggestions do become future video topics. And as always, good luck, fight well, and I will see you on the battlefield.